Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, US and Russian delegations have concluded talks, while Kyiv and Washington begin a new round of discussions in the Saudi capital. Reports say top US officials have mistakenly disclosed war plans on Yemen while using a public messaging app. And Egyptian security sources say Cairo has proposed a new plan to restore the Gaza ceasefire. We begin with efforts to end the Ukraine crisis. Russian and US delegations have concluded talks in Saudi Arabia that mainly focused on reaching a Black Sea ceasefire deal before securing a broader agreement on ending the Ukraine conflict. The negotiations followed a meeting between the United States and Ukraine. Nadia Swan has the story from Riyadh.
Just one day after US negotiators held talks with Ukraine in the Saudi capital of Riyadh, officials met separately with a Russian delegation on Monday. All sides are trying to find common ground on a possible ceasefire in Ukraine. The proposals have focused on protecting energy facilities and critical infrastructure. While Washington is pushing for an agreement to protect Black Sea shipping first, a broader deal remains uncertain, with key issues such as energy infrastructure, nuclear plants and territorial control still hotly contested. These meetings mark a major diplomatic push by President Donald Trump, who spoke with both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky last week. But with ongoing airstrikes and conflicting demands, the path to peace remains complex. The talks in Saudi Arabia come as the conflict enters its fourth year. While Ukraine and Russia tentatively agreed to a 30-day pause, fresh airstrikes on Russian oil depots and Ukrainian power grids have already cast doubt on that commitment. Meanwhile, the US has floated the idea of playing a part in Ukraine's nuclear energy sector, including modernizing the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia plant. But rebuilding it could take years and billions of dollars. Another key issue on the table, Black Sea shipping. After Russia withdrew from a previous UN-backed grain deal, new security guarantees are being discussed. There's also the issue of further prisoner exchanges. But deep divisions remain. Russia insists Ukraine must abandon its NATO ambitions, while Kyiv argues membership is its best security guarantee. And while Moscow wants Western sanctions eased, Washington says it is weighing new economic measures until a lasting peace is reached. So while there's a mutual understanding on the need for a resolution, the negotiations in Riyadh are just the start of a difficult peace process.
That was Nadia Swan reporting in Riyadh. Ukrainian and US delegations have started a new round of bilateral talks in the Saudi capital. The talks come on the heels of the US-Russia meeting that lasted over 12 hours on Monday. Meantime, Kyiv has reported dozens of casualties following a Russian missile attack in Sumy. The Kremlin says Russia has halted strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, despite reports of continued Ukrainian attacks on Russian energy targets. Moscow and Washington agree on the need to reach a settlement in the Ukraine conflict, but many details remain unresolved. Dasha Chinishova reports from Moscow.
Kremlin has indicated it is the safety of navigation in the Black Sea that will be at the core, and also other issues related to this initiative, particularly the aspects regarding the conditions that have not been implemented before. Those are related to the Russian side, the restoration of SWIFT payment system for Russia's Rossельхозbank, ammonia pipeline connecting Odessa and Tolyatti. These are the issues that Moscow has said that will be probably on the table there. They do not expect any quick results to come out because of the complexity of the matters. Indeed, there are other aspects on the table as well, and they are actually numerous. Potentially, we are talking here about very difficult negotiations, and the Kremlin has been very clear about it, suggesting, however, that there is the common understanding between Moscow and Washington that this issue on the Ukrainian settlement should be resolved in the negotiated manner. So that's on the positive side. The sides do actually understand they need to talk to one another to resolve those complex issues. Obviously, Moscow understands how difficult they are, and therefore they warn against hasty conclusions. Also, we understand that Russia continues being attacked by the Ukrainian side against Russia's energy infrastructure. And this is also another thing that is happening against the backdrop of those negotiations, with Moscow now saying that there were even more attacks by the Ukrainian side against Russia's energy sector. Those were carried out in Belgrade region on a Sunday evening. There have been more attacks against Crimea and more attacks against Russia's south, Krasnodar region. So all that is taking place as Russia says its order not to strike Ukrainian energy facilities is still in place, and Moscow abides by this decision. So indeed, what matters at this stage from the Russian perspective is that these are the negotiations that are taking place. Again, the thing to keep in mind that these are not direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv. Those talks are yet to come, but definitely this is the beginning, and Moscow has said before, indeed it is a long journey.
That was Stasha Chinishova reporting from Moscow. Moving on to North America. Reports say top U.S. officials have mistakenly disclosed war plans on Yemen while using a public messaging app. Editor-in-Chief Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic reviewed the incident in a recently published article. Several national security officials in the group chat also suggested Europe could compensate the U.S. for the strikes on the Houthis. Edis Tianshan has more from Los Angeles.
This journalist, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, suddenly found himself added into this group text messaging on an application that is called Signal, which is known for encrypted messaging, but of course it is not one of those used by the U.S. government for the very sensitive communications like this one. We do know from the journalist's article that it was within 2 hours where he was added into this group and started receiving these messages about the U.S. war plans in Yemen that the U.S. Army soon after launched its attacks within a couple of hours, essentially carrying out airstrikes on the Houthi groups in Yemen. Now, of course, the most important reaction about this incident itself came from the White House itself, essentially confirming that it is true that the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth did disclose this exchange did take place in this group messaging. And soon after, we have also heard from President Donald Trump himself when he was asked about this incident by some of the reporters. Let's take a listen.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it.
Now, what we've gathered from that group, the messaging that happened within that group chat, is that a number of the members in the group text were essentially talking about how Europe could be asked to compensate for these strikes. Waltz, one of the people in the group, was essentially saying that he was already working with other government departments to determine how to compile the cost, the total cost of having carried out these strikes in a way to essentially levy them on Europe. Just as important, another message coming from Hegseth. Again, we're talking about the former Fox News television anchor who is now the head of he's now the Secretary of Defense. He goes ahead in one message essentially sharing the Vice President's quote-unquote loathing of European freeloading.
That was Edis Tianshan on the latest White House security scandal. Turning to the Middle East, Egyptian security sources say Cairo has proposed a new plan to restore the Gaza ceasefire. The plan calls for another 40-day ceasefire in exchange for the release of 5 Israeli hostages and a timetable for the release of all remaining hostages. It also includes the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. This comes as Israel continues attacks on the Strip. Rami Amagari reports from Gaza.
Dozens of people have been killed, including 2 journalists from the northern and the southern Gaza Strip. These journalists were killed, actually, that's reported to be killed by the Israeli army. Mother, women and children. Offensive on the southern Gaza Strip city of Rafah, mainly Tel Sultan neighborhood. The Israeli army ordered the population of that neighborhood to leave immediately. They allowed them to leave walking down, not to be carried on vehicles, by vehicles or any other transport means. That's the situation. They have been locked down in the neighborhood. Out of a sudden, Israeli army incurred into the neighborhood and or forced the population out. There was a strike on the hospital, on the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis city, south of the Gaza Strip, when the Israeli army said in a statement that it targeted a Hamas militant or a Hamas senior local leader over there who was being treated at the hospital when a drone hit that hospital out of a sudden. These developments come against the backdrop of some kind of talks, report about talks for a ceasefire, return to the ceasefire state that preceded this Israeli military action. There is hope by the population there will be a ceasefire. There are reports that Hamas agreed to release 5 Israeli hostages in return for the return of the ceasefire case and the allowing by Israel of truckloads of aid assistance and goods and commodities to Gaza.
That was Rami Amagari reporting in Gaza. Finally, in China, the Boao Forum for Asia annual conference is underway in southern China. Nearly 2,000 representatives from over 60 countries and regions are attending the event in the island province of Hainan. Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang is set to deliver a keynote speech at the opening plenary of the event on Thursday. The forum is widely seen as Asia's answer to Davos. The theme this year is Asia in the Changing World Towards a Shared Future. The theme reflects efforts in the region to boost multilateralism, promote openness and development, and jointly respond to global challenges. Xue Yi has more.
At the very first day in Boao Forum, the packed schedule has just begun and the event has released 2 groundbreaking reports. I'm holding them right now. One is the annual report on Asia Economic Outlook and the Integration Progress, and the other one is the special report on SDG and for Asia Going Green. And according to the reports, Asia is set to boost the economic growth to 4.5% in 2025, higher than the 4.4% in 2024 as the powerhouse of global economy. And also the Boao report has highlighted the significance of the green transformation in Asia countries on the achievements for the green economy. And for more insights and highlights, we are very honored to be joined by Ms. Wang Yao. She's the Director General of the International Institute of Green Finance at the Central University of Finance and Economics. So first, let's talk about the report on the Asia Going Green. Yeah. So what's your takeaway on this report?
Yeah, this report actually figure out 3 pillars for Asia countries' green transition. One is climate strategy, legislation, and regulation. Second is technology. Third is finance. And from financial perspective, this report actually analyzes Asian countries' climate finance needs and then suggests some innovative financial instruments. And the most interesting is there are 2 chapters. One is talk about carbon market connectivity, and secondly is about nature in infrastructure. So I think this is also 2 very important areas that green finance should cover.
Yes, and nature as infrastructure is much innovative.
Yeah, right.
And also, Boao reports reiterate the green finance and international cooperation in Asia countries. So, from your perspective, how could Asia countries cooperate with each other on to build the mechanism on green finance and investment to achieve the SDG?
We should do the standard harmonization for the countries. Because actually, when countries to figure out what is green or what is not green, we should have a common taxonomy. So now China EU and Singapore already launched a common ground taxonomy on that. So I think in the future, maybe ASEAN country and other Asian country can also join this. Secondly, I think we should have a market connective, for the capital market and the financial market, the capital flow and also capacity, knowledge we should sharing. So market connectivity is also very crucial for cross-border investment.
That was Xue Yi reporting. Now recapping the headlines, US and Russian delegations have concluded talks while Kyiv and Washington begin a new round of discussions in the Saudi capital. Reports say top US officials have mistakenly disclosed war plans on Yemen while using a public messaging app. And Egyptian security sources say Cairo has proposed a new plan to restore the Gaza ceasefire. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.